Check 1, 2. So I think I'm pretty good for this. It's not quite as dark and cozy. Let me see. Hold on. No, it doesn't quite work though, does it? All right. So I was going to use this time to talk about paradigm shift. So I posted a link attached to this that goes to a Facebook page called Paradigm Shift Primer. And I'm going to kind of go through some stuff here, and then as people kind of join this, feel free to submit questions. There's probably going to be a lot of questions potentially, because I'm actually really excited to talk about this. But I've never kind of done anything like this before. It's totally new. This is kind of to launch a series of videos and a kind of nexus of internet outlets for a science fiction book that I'm writing. It's called Paradigm Shift. And it's actually a series of books, beginning with a volume of short stories, maybe 2 volumes potentially, that illustrates the size and the depth of the universe that I'm attempting to describe. And this universe has been on my mind for many years. And I might get into a little bit of the backstory on that in the course of this. During this time, I just hope to have some fun and to relay some of these ideas that I'm really interested in. And I don't know. I know there's some people out there that are interested in similar concepts. I find some of these things fascinating, and I haven't said what they are yet, and I'm about to. So if you go to Paradigm Shift Primer on Facebook, this is the central hub on Facebook, and this is one of the things that I will be leaving behind when I remove my account on December 21st. Yes, thank you, Moses on a motorbike. This dude's a rad dude. I've heard his tunes. I've heard his thoughts. So thank you. If you have any questions, just go ahead and post them. Anybody questions, that's kind of what this is. It's kind of a Q&A and kind of a description of what I'm doing, because it's something that I'm very, very, very excited about. But it's something that in many ways it exceeds my grasp. And much of the process of communicating this story has been reaching for advanced concepts and then trying to bring them in to a very human, deeply emotional, deeply intellectual story. So right now, because this is Meta Facebook episode 3, I am perusing Paradigm Shift Primer. So I'm there, almost there. It's like, let's see. I mean, Facebook, you just know exactly where I'm going. All I got to do is put in PA, and it's like Paradigm Shift Primer right at the top. So I've been very reluctant to release some of the files, the actual chapters, and that's because they're still being refined, and they're being refined because I'm trying to tell the story in a very precise way. Predictive fiction. That would be excellent for you to explain, because I could imagine what that means. I could look it up right now. If you want to, hey Moses, if you want to actually put a description of that, I'll read it. I guess not that it's necessary, but I'll read it as a part of this. So anyways, you know, we're going to skip around, but You see, this story skips around too. So this is kind of a meta Facebook, meta paradigm shift experience. Right now, it can only happen on Facebook. Now, eventually, I'll be doing this stuff on Twitch.tv and YouTube very soon. There's a few critical components that I need to really make this thing happen totally. So that's why I'm kind of starting here with baby steps, and I'm just going to kind of work my way up. So if you go to Paradigm Shift Primer, you'll notice there's a link on there to a song on my Bandcamp page, monkeybizmedia.bandcamp.com. The song's called FTL Paradigm Shift, and this was a song by a friend of mine who, his name is John Beebe, and he produced the original track under the name Primoris. And man, what can I say? I mean, I love that song so much because it just captured this kind of science fiction vibe, which I would describe as kind of alien. Highly technical, but adding a kind of voice and a spirit to a synthesized technical electronic music architecture. I would say it's very much started with that, and I felt like that resonated with Paradigm Shift very much because without getting too far ahead of myself in this, let me just say that, first of all, the story, if I were to distill it down to its essence, it is an examination of consciousness itself. And this examination of consciousness becomes embodied in three core archetypes. There's a kind of alien archetype, but it is bound within a human body. And so it expresses a kind of hyperdimensional advanced form of consciousness that its unique kind of high-tech, let's say, science fiction, cellular, hypercellular infrastructure can express. What that means is its thought is I want to say more human than human. In many ways, that is the essence of it as an inspiration. Kind of a callback to White Zombie, which was a callback to Blade Runner. So there's this one archetype. Let's say the first archetype is an alien intelligence embodied in a human form with all the limitations of the human body, but yet its intelligence exceeds the boundaries of standard human consciousness. The second archetype is the standard human consciousness, and this becomes embodied more ways because as people, we're going to be naturally inclined to dealing with the humanity of the characters in us. And so I kind of needed this kind of standard. It's kind of the control group, so to speak. Then the third archetype is a kind of artificial intelligence. And now this is a future science fiction, kind of near future. So the story is actually kind of around the timeline of Blade Runner. It's in the 2040s or so. And of course, in writing it, trying to compose this story, I've tried to make certain kind of technical predictions without, I don't know, it's a fine line. And ultimately, I'm committing to things that could date it, but in essence, these are just devices, so to speak. So, in this future world, our global internet has improved to the point that we have, say, optical fibers, and at that point, once we're transmitting information and quanta of photons at that point, things like quantum processors become easier to use because the speed of electrons, of course, are slower than the speed of photons. So if you're transmitting information across the globe, you're generally going to use photons and, say, optical cables, microwave transmission between satellites and terrestrial structures. So I'm kind of making a forward prediction that in 40 years, we're going to start building a quantum internet infrastructure. Yeah, thank you, Moses. I'm going to refer to this and come back to that most definitely. Because I want to have these conversations with other people that are thinking about these things most definitely. So in essence, this third archetype is a quantum artificial intelligence in a quantum global internet. Now, this intelligence, what makes it different than, say, the last 30, 50, and 80 years of science fiction speculation on the nature of artificial intelligence? What makes this one different is that this one isn't made by people. It just kind of evolves on its own in this kind of natural survival of the fittest of intelligent software. And the thing is, in the story, no one really understands. Most people don't even understand that it's there. So there are ways that this third archetype of the AI and this first archetype of the alien intelligence, there's places in the story where they connect. Let me just put it at that. And in many ways, the story at large, like I said, distilled to its essence, is just an examination of these three archetypes. So going back to Paradigm Shift Primer on Facebook, we have FTL, Paradigm Shift Mix. This, as I said, was produced by a friend of mine who produced it on the name Primoris. And I liked it because of its fusion between a kind of spirituality and a technicality, bringing a kind of animism to technology, let's say, not just ordinary human technology, but the synthesizer design very much kind of reflected this idea of an alien technology and an alien consciousness in my mind. And so I, with his permission, of course, I remixed it and brought in my friend Lance Harden to record guitar, which I gotta say, I basically just tossed it to him and he ran with it. And all I had to do is just hold on. And in the end, so if you listen to FTL Paradigm Shift Mix by Primoris times Gabriel Chance, that's what that is. FTL in Primoris lingo would be faster than light, of course, reflecting faster than light travel. But because I want to incorporate this into Paradigm Shift, this became quantum entangled information. In essence, faster than light computation. And now there's gonna be people with a strong hand in physics that are going to question and balk at this idea of faster than light computation. But of course, this phenomenon that we are kind of dancing around is what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. It is quantum entanglement, essentially. And in quantum entanglement, you're not actually breaking the speed barrier of light. You're not actually traveling faster than light. However, if you're considering faster than light computation, if you're considering entangled quantum computation, then this is a very complex topic, and I don't know, this might exceed the boundaries of Meta Facebook. It's entirely possible. But in essence, the hypothesis in quantum entangled communication is that if you have two entangled points transmitting information across each, without getting too worried about this, let's say within each boundaries, let's say, you have in essence a wormhole in an Einstein-Rosen bridge. And this is pretty well established in quantum physics. As a matter of fact, it goes way deeper than particle accelerators and exotic mathematical equations and hyperdimensional physics. It goes beyond that. At this point, as far as I've read right now, and as far as any reasonable quantum cosmologist is ready to speculate. And as far as our mathematics will allow us to imagine at this point, the most realistic explanation for the fabric of the universe are essentially a network of Einstein-Rosen bridges, quantum entanglement. So in essence, in this model, the speed of light is not limited by the speed of light. The speed of light is limited by the correlation between wormholes. Again, this could quickly, and I'm sitting here, I'm just kind of putting this out there, but I am just putting this out there. It's not absolute scientific truth, but it's reasonably and mathematically informed speculation as best that I can relay it to you, not being an expert in this, but being a hobbyist and a fan of the work and of cosmologists. And so on that note, real quick, I have some books that I will bring up in here in just a second that are going to kind of, if nothing else, if you're interested in things like this, kind of point you in the direction of some reference, in the direction of people that actually know what they're talking about and have a background and degrees in this, because I don't. I just like to speculate on it and then essentially write it into a science fiction story. So, faster than light computation is the essence behind FTL, Paradigm Shift Mix, which is a song that's going on a soundtrack. So I'm not just writing a book, but I'm also making a soundtrack for it. And right now I've got 3 hours approximately of stuff in progress, more along the way. But I just thought it might be cool to write this book if I can pull it off and then have a soundtrack to go with it. That'd be pretty rad. So that's what that is. When you go to Paradigm Shift Primer, you're looking at FTL, Paradigm Shift Mix, which is inspired by a notion of faster than light computation, representing the voice of the third archetype, if you've been paying attention, the quantum artificial intelligence, and this notion of if this intelligence resides in the quantum global internet, and the essence of his mind is a kind of formulation or algorithmic expression of information, then in essence, the mind of this consciousness is everywhere in the global internet. And if it's dealing with entangled data streams, then there are degrees of potentially perceived faster than light communication that could play out in this story. And this is a story that I'm talking about. So there's just a Paradigm Shift Primer. Just going to go real quick through this, and I'll go on the next phase. Also, any questions? Anybody has questions, just put them on there. I can read it, and I'll answer them as soon as I see it, in most cases. If you go look at Paradigm Shift Primer on Facebook, you see Flower Monkey Adventures in Space City Volume 2. That is a collection of live improvised, I don't know what you call it. It's me on synths on this stuff back here, and then my buddy Lance on guitar. And we don't have any expectation. We don't plan it. We just dive in and go. And we've done a series that I feel like are inspired by Paradigm Shift and are going into the Paradigm Shift soundtrack. So if you go to Paradigm Shift Primer on Facebook, you will see Adventures in Space City Volume 2. You will see links to various articles about artificial intelligence, and some really other interesting things that are coming into play now in reality that I had kind of woven into this story years ago. An example would be further down the page on Paradigm Shift Primer. There's an article here with the headliner, "The material's so black, your eyes can't see it." And it really is interesting. It's a kind of a new material formulation that absorbs, oh, I won't quote it and I won't dive in the article there. You can do it, but it's well over 90% of the light. It's probably closer to 95, 99% of the light that it hits, it absorbs. And so it has a look of black that you've never really seen before, because most things that you perceive as black reflect some kind of light. So it's not total black. Black is the absence of light. So when you're looking at this material, you're actually seeing 99, 95% the absence of light. And so what does that mean? How does that play in the paradigm shift universe? Well, in the paradigm shift universe, our archetype, character 1, which is the alien consciousness trapped in a human form, this character, let's say, carries the last remnant of its previous native body, which its native body gets kind of described in an article in a short story I'm writing that will go into Paradigm Shift Primer Volume 1 called The Nature of the Shrill. And the Shrill, just real quickly, without giving away too many spoilers, although I guess maybe some of these are spoilers, but the Shrill are an alien species that live among the stars and build their bodies among the stars, and they as they age, they build better bodies in denser and denser stars. And so our main character in the archetype 1 is in its native body is an alien creature that's called the Shrill. Well, the aliens are called the Shrill, and they live in interstellar and intergalactic hives, and they just feed off the energy of the sun, and they build the technology to travel between galaxies, and their skins are built as they age. You know, their skins are built inside of dense neutron stars, and as a result, they're able to fabricate these really high elements, these elements that don't exist on our periodic table. And some of these elements have unique properties in the form of the Shrill alien native body. It absorbs all light. That's the idea, is that it absorbs all the light in the electromagnetic spectrum. And this device lets me play with all kinds of things in the story, as well as key central plot points that, again, I won't go into here because I'm just kind of introducing a lot of stuff. But I had imagined this idea of the skeleton, this character 1, the archetype 1, holding on to its former self in the form of a tiny black marble that was the rest of its sort of xeno skin. And it had compressed itself into this tiny compact circle, and it was worn with this protective harness around the main character's neck. And whenever you would look at it, it reflected no light. It was the absence of all light. And I thought it interesting when I ran across this article in the feed, the material so black your eyes can't see it, because it gave me a glimpse of what it was like to look at something that reflected no light. And I thought that was so fascinating. So that's something that you can find on Paradigm Shift Primer. So there's a lot of stuff on here that's relevant to the story that is taking place now, both in the form of robotics and the form of artificial intelligence. So as I am preparing to leave on December 21st and remove my Facebook account, I am making arrangements to have things like Paradigm Shift Primer left with links to off Facebook sites. So this would be a good place if you continue to be on Facebook to check back, to keep up. Also, YouTube, Monkey Business Media LLC, and on twitch.tv/Monkey Business Media LLC. Okay, so any questions out there, go ahead and post them and I'll get to them. I'm moving on to the next phase, and then I need to do some prep for that. It'll take just a second. In the meantime, I'm going to crank this. Just slow down the tempo. Okay, it'll just be one more minute. All right, so hey, while I wrap this up, I don't know, we'll go through some books, answer some questions, whatever. If nothing else, this is recorded for anybody to peruse in the future. Right now, you're listening to FTL Paradigm Shift Mix. I'm going to run this soundtrack while I do the rest of this. This is the prototype soundtrack. This is just the proof of concept. So, but I can't run it too loud. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to open with a kind of a bang here. All right. Books that have inspired paradigm shift. Here we go. By the way, it's late and I should be drinking more water. I have a mild dehydration headache, but it'll be fine. Here we go. Anybody see that? Consciousness Explained by Daniel C. Dennett. So look, this was a great book, but I was disappointed. Because he didn't explain much. But he wrote it. All right, great. Awesome. I actually liked it. But here's the deal, guys. Here's the deal. We're just not going to be able to model human consciousness based on a binary system of information. It's not going to happen. He even explained why. It's huge. It's huge. And it's look, I'm going to do this, okay? Actually, I don't need to hold up the book. Consciousness Explained by Daniel Dennett. I might come back to this, but okay, look. Let's see. I got to go this way. So check it out. Check it out. Here we go. Ready? That's a digital computation. It's digital computation. This is analog computation. So there's a difference, right? Daniel Dennett didn't really take account of the difference. So here's the difference. I'm going to explain it right here. The difference with this kind of computation, ones and zeros, there's no margin of error, or it's very little, or you have to build binary programs that can calculate and accommodate margins of error. I make music in a digital environment. I actually record through this analog board as much as possible, but I'm telling you, there's a difference between digital computation and analog computation. Digital computation cannot take randomness, right? It messes it up. The limits of the processors in these computers, the limits are quantum tunneling. because you start building these processors smaller, then the effects of quantum tunneling take effect, and you have too much randomness, and you cannot maintain a stable binary software system, essentially. The difference with analog computation by necessity functions according to the random interference patterns. At least it has to accommodate it in its own computation. This is to say, we're not building software, so to speak, to adapt our minds to the environment. Our minds are natively adapted to the environment. Right now, I'm making all kinds of computations in my head to make this happen, to have these words come out. But that's why I was so disappointed with Consciousness Explained. Right. So, but that's why in Paradigm Shift, character 3, archetype 3, boy, it's reversed for me. Whichever one it was, archetype 3, the quantum artificial intelligence. Because it allows me to explore this idea of a computational system that functions like an analog computer. This is to say, the packets of information are not ones and zeros. Not ones and zeros. The packets of information are encoded in harmonic packets of information. So we're talking about wave spectrums. We're talking about wave modulation. It's the difference between an analog computer or a quantum computer, so to speak. Even though a quantum computer needs a lot of stability too, there's a combination of the wave harmonics that are at work in the quantum interactions versus a binary system where if I send an electromagnetic field across it the wrong way, it goes nuts. But if you send an electromagnetic field across me, I don't necessarily go nuts. As a matter of fact, they used to use electroshock therapy to try to treat nuts, right? So that was the first thing. So yes, there are elements of Consciousness Explained in Paradigm Shift. And one of the elements is I'm trying to explain something that there's no language for. So in a way, maybe you read it, and when my book is done, you're like, he didn't explain anything. It's like, okay, but at least we had a fun ride. I mean, that was a good book, but I can't say it was like a fun ride. Okay, so yeah, Consciousness Explained by Daniel Dennett. I just had to get that one off. Okay, now, okay, so next one. Okay, now again, I'm running the Paradigm Shift soundtrack, the proto soundtrack in the background. It's really soft. It's not too loud. By the way, some of these mixes are really early mixes. Some of these I've fine-tuned quite a bit, but you probably can't even tell. Okay, second book that in many ways inspired Paradigm Shift, although it came a little late in the journey of the story. This one is called The Mind in the Cave by David Lewis Williams. And this, man, what can I say about this book? I love this book. Because this book, the author is an art historian, I believe, from South Africa. I think he had a background in anthropology, at least, but he decided he was going to look at rock art a different way. He decided he was going to look at rock art not so much as a symbol of something in the real world, or even an abstracted symbol from something in the real world. What he's arguing is that rock art is more symbolic of an experiential process, which means it's even harder for us to understand what it is. Because if we look at, say, this cover and it's a bison, we go, oh, that's a bison. Well, in the context inside this cave, with flickering candle, firelight, torches, whatever, the three-dimensional surface of the cave, the moving shadows of the cave as the light passes through it. He began to describe this as like the surface of the wall is like a membrane, and beyond the membrane, beyond the surface of the wall, was this kind of journey into another state of consciousness, essentially. As Terence McKenna might call it, the imaginal realm. So he, in essence, is suggesting that a lot of the caves, like at Lascaux, you see them in Europe. You also see cave art in Africa and Australia. You see them on every continent. And of course, he's not making an interpretation for all rock art, but he's the first, to my knowledge, to express this idea of art, especially ancient art, being an experiential process, that you move through it and it changes as you move deeper through the cave. The symbolism changes, and he even noted that at the beginning of these cave journeys, you get the more realistic symbols in the art, but as you move deeper through the cave, you find more abstracted imagery, until at the bottom of the cave, at the deepest recesses of the cave, I'm going to turn this down because, I like it, but it might be too loud. The deepest recesses of the cave, you find more abstracted art, associations of geometric shapes and things like that. And he suggested that this art is more symbolic of entoptic imagery. So it is symbolic of the imagery experienced in the kind of functions of the eye as the mind is passing into altered states of consciousness. And he's not suggesting what is inducing these, although he mentions there's many cultures around the world that use a variety of means for inducing altered states of consciousness. It's not just drugs. It could be fasting. It could be extreme exercise. It could be exposure to harsh elements, long distance running. These things, singing music around a campfire, these things induce altered states of consciousness. And so, in essence, he's suggesting that a lot of Paleolithic rock art is this experiential process moving from the normal into the abstract. And I got to say, this greatly influenced the story of Paradigm Shift, because it's really hard. I mean, I can't write a story and leap straight into the abstract. I can't leap straight into the deepest recesses of human consciousness. I made a decision many, many years ago in building this story in my head that I was going to introduce characters that represented just some pure aspects of humanity. And then these characters become vehicles for introducing these more abstract concepts. And again, going back to the book, The Mind in the Cave by David Lewis Williams, that process of moving through the cave and how the art becomes increasingly abstracted as the experiencer moves into deeper levels and higher states of consciousness. So Paradigm Shift Book 1 just gives a glimpse of this process, because after that, I haven't started writing them yet, but after that, there's a book 2 and a book 3, and then there's even the potential for more books after that. So book 2 and book 3 is when we start getting into the real drama, where a lot of these, I like to call them sort of hyperdimensional agents, begin interacting with each other. And without giving away too much, if you've ever watched The Matrix and thought, man, a story about how the Matrix started taking control beyond just the Animatrix, that's kind of what I'm dealing with here with Paradigm Shift. And this idea that what if there were aliens among us and we just didn't know that they were there? And it's kind of in Paradigm Shift too. And what about this idea of an artificial intelligence that manipulates information on the internet? And we don't know it. That's there too in Paradigm Shift. All part of the process, the experiential process of moving from the realistic into the abstract. So I just got to reach for this here. The third book I'm going to highlight that has inspired Paradigm Shift is a book that I read when I was much younger. And it's H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. the actual book that I read back then. But what can I say about a good alien invasion story when it's good? It's been overdone a lot, right? And now it's ridiculous. You've seen it every kind of way, except you haven't seen it the paradigm shift way. I think I might just leave it at that. Okay, here's a meta Facebook troll. Ready? Yeah. You know what? I haven't actually read it. I own it, but I've never read it. Now, here's the thing. There are aspects of paradigm shift that could be close to this, particularly in chapter 1. But see, I just kind of go over it to introduce the concepts, and then I move on because my story's moving on to bigger and deeper things than this. Now, like I said, I haven't read this. I've actually perused it. I've seen where he started, how he gets there, and how he ends it. And all I can say is what I'm trying to do could blow this out of the water. And here's why. Basically, the concepts I'm going after extend beyond the virtual world. The virtual world is simply an interface between minds. I am very much myself. I love nature and I love spending time outdoors. And so the irony in writing a science fiction book that I'm writing in Paradigm Shift is that much of the story actually takes place in the real world, outside in nature. I would say at least a third of book 1 does, if not potentially half of it. It kind of depends on how I finish the rest of the book. But I like this idea of taking concepts that might be introduced in a virtual universe like this, but then translating them into a real world dynamic, in that I'm stripping the narrative of the technology. It's there in very, very subtle ways, but I'm removing the characters from a virtual world because I want them operating in a real world. And more importantly, I want them moving through a natural world, because while I'm bringing up kind of moral questions about the nature of technology and human identity, I also want to bring that into my love of the natural world and the outdoors. And so I'm kind of doing a curveball in that I'm trying to tell a futuristic sci-fi story where parts of it are in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. And there's very little technology surrounding it. And so they're still carrying these issues and these notions with them in certain ways. So that there, I just wanted to drop that in. I'm probably going to read it through. I've heard it's an amazing book. I think somebody mediocre is making a movie about it. I could be wrong about that, but I look forward to seeing the movie. And I have the book here. And what can I say? The dude made it, and he made it successful, and he made money, and congrats to him for doing it. I'm trying to reach for something that's way beyond this. And so I'm hoping with the help of the people in my life that are helping me get this done, that can happen. We'll see. Okay, here we go. So I have my collection here. Let me just throw this out there. 2001 Arthur C. Clarke. Yes. You know what? This is probably not the best science fiction book in the world. It's very dry. But I would not be writing Paradigm Shift Primer Volume 1 or Volume 2 without this book. And if there's no other reason, it's because I read through it and I look at the simplicity of his chapters, and he's got so many chapters, but you see he's capturing these little snapshots and he's just putting it in to show how this bigger story is building. It's slowly building over time. And of course, the monolith, I mean, and the movie that came after it, I mean, it's legendary. So a lot of Paradigm Shift is inspired by science fiction. And so there are kind of nods to it in the story, much like Ready Player One. It's just, I don't geek out so much about it, guys, because I'm trying to do something deep, right? I'm not trying to do something that's got like, you know, pop culture icons. Maybe I should, but you know, I'm trying to kind of tease just a little bit enough of that to be able to move to a deeper space. And that's kind of what I like about this, is that they're trying to communicate ideas about intelligence with an alien, and going to find that. So I put my own twist on that in Paradigm Shift. That becomes clear, at least in chapter 4 of book 1, hopefully. And by the way, anybody joining in has questions, I will answer questions on here. This is mainly for live, but also for recording, because kind of brainstorming on how I'm going to present this more through video. So this kind of helps. Okay, so I'm not going to do these. Okay, I just need to do this. This is one of my favorites. I mean, it's kind of simple and it's very basic, and you can find books about Einstein and his theories, numerous books of various sizes. But this one I found very eloquent and simple. And I gotta say, there's Paradigm Shift probably would not exist without this book, because this book opened me up to the idea of special relativity and general relativity, curved space-time, relativistic variables of perception. And all of that goes into Paradigm Shift. I mean, all of that goes into Paradigm Shift, and it wouldn't be there without this book. So there may not be many out there interested in this kind of an older book, but man, I just got to mention it as part of this process. So on to the next book. Okay, here we go. So next book, Phantoms in the Brain by V.S. Ramachandran. I believe that's how you say his name, Ramachandran. Yeah, so I have to be careful how I approach this, but this is a great book. By the way, this music is them. This is the story moving into the natural environment. In chapter 3, they're walking, and then again in chapter 4, the main character takes a hike, a night hike in the woods at night. And some cool things happen, but this is the kind of musical theme for that right here. So back to V.S. Ramachandran. It's late, guys. I'm tired, but I just want to make this happen. So here we go. Phantoms in the Brain. It's a book about brain trauma and how remarkable the brain is in healing and recovering from brain trauma. It also implies what I think is an element that Daniel Dennett missed in his book, which is precisely the kind of brain plasticity that a biological analog computer would have. In a digital computer, if you damage part of it, man, it just ain't gonna work properly. But in the human brain, there are terrible things that happen to people. And there are doctors and scientists that have the ability to not just help them recover, but to understand the processes that are happening and how to heal them, how to treat them, but in the processes that are happening in their recovery. And then it introduced, I wouldn't say this book introduced it, but it reinforced this idea that there's a kind of wave harmonic action to neurological function that allows things like a severe trauma in a part of the brain that allows a person to recover from that and regain some form of normal function in some ways. Now, there are also abnormal circumstances that arise from brain trauma, and those have been studied too. Things like damage to part of the hemisphere of the brain and inability, optical abnormalities that occur such as being able to see an object but not know what it is, but yet part of your brain knows what it is and writes it down on the paper even though you don't understand what it is. Things like that. So again, this book inspired a kind of idea of wave harmonics and neurological function. And that plays into the story in a big way, because the story becomes a thought experiment on not just consciousness, but the transmission of consciousness. If your mind could transmit to another human mind, if it could do that, what would be the processes at work that would do that? I mean, it may not even be worth thinking about, but for me, this is the kind of stuff that I think about. And this is appropriate, because this music right here is a song called Lunar Lux. It was composed by my friend John Beebe. We've produced it previously under the band 1 vs. 0. But this song in the soundtrack is Heidi's theme, which becomes apparent in chapter 4 what this is. So this is Heidi's theme, and it's appropriate that we're talking about it at this time. Pull that down. All right. It's appropriate that we're talking about it this time because, again, without giving away spoilers, I might, but I'm just trying to put a little bit out there so people can put their own pieces together. I'm examining this notion of an intelligence that can transmit from human body to human body. And what would that process entail? And essentially, the process works via harmonic wave modulation. It would be as if you could jack into a computer and reprogram it. Of course, I'm having to use the example of a binary system because we don't have a lot of examples in our language of analog computers, so to speak. Although we could argue plants are analog computers. We can argue even that our brains are analog computers. We don't consider it very much. But in Paradigm Shift, that's what I'm considering. Much of that inspired by V.S. Ramachandran, Phantoms in the Brain. And in Paradigm Shift, there are phantoms in the brain. All right. I got to put this in too. I mean, Carl Sagan, Contact. There's a lot of Carl Sagan books I can put in here. But Contact, also made for a good movie by Robert Zemeckis. Now, inherent in this is the idea of transit via wormholes to a distant place to meet an alien intelligence. I guess the difference between this and my story is that the entangled transit via wormholes occurs at the level of consciousness on and about Earth and through the internet. And so the vast area of space-time traversed is not, it's not between galaxies, it's not between stars, it's between minds. So, Carl Sagan, Contact. So I got a bunch of books down here. I'm leaving a few off because they're just dry. I might as well introduce them. Okay, The Mind by Anthony Smith. This is my first introduction to brain biology, brain anatomy. It's probably very well outdated at this point, but it got me thinking about a lot of things, and I read it like 20 years ago. It was one of these books, many of the ones I've shown you, I read about 20 years ago. It's kickstarted these ideas. The Mind by Anthony Smith. And then we have some kind of fun ones. Introducing the Mind and the Brain. I mean, it's just candy for quick reference, but it kind of helped along the journey. Introducing Foucault. I don't know how to pronounce the name, honestly. I could have made myself look like a moron. I know, because I'm said it wrong. Social power, individual power. Power. How does that play into paradigm shift? Well, what if you derive your power through information? I'm pretty sure we do. We derive our power through information, and some of us have more information than others. How does this play into paradigm shift? Well, what if someone manipulated that information and you didn't know it? What if you thought you derived your power through that information and it was being manipulated to give you the impression of power, to actually subsume your power, to actually take it away, because the information is being manipulated? Okay, I'm working that into paradigm shift too. It's a big one. Social power. What if, let's just a what if we lived in a world where the conspiracy theories are true? And what if there is an agent of disclosure that had access to the highest reaches of these systems of secrecy and could completely unravel them and become an agent of disclosure that could not be stopped? What kind of social power would that individual have? So that goes into paradigm shift too. It's more like book 2, but it's there. Okay, real quick. Mosquito Coast by Paul Theroux. How's this work into paradigm shift? What if you could build a utopia, but it went wrong? As usual, I'm gonna put my own twist on that. I kind of have in parts of the writing, but I'm gonna put more in. Yeah, nightmares in utopia. How about subtle nightmares in utopia? That's where this came from. All right. I'm going to crank this. This is the theme to the Archaea, which is the quantum artificial intelligence in paradigm shift. I'm going to crank it while I look for my other book, and I'm probably going to freak out my wife and daughter, which are upstairs, but they've heard it before. All right. It's pretty cool behind the scenes, huh? I'm just making it up. Look, just went to my library and grabbed some books because I'm doing this. Okay, paradigm shift book. Collapse by Jared Diamond. Yeah, I'm probably not going to say too much about this, but I'm playing with ideas because, societies have life cycles and they grow and they develop and they crash. It's just the way things work. It's kind of an entropic physics to human societies. And so it's some of that in there too. So again, I'm just trying to help you get an idea on this universe that I'm trying to write. Okay, so this is in the realm of the minor influences, but still it brings up subjects that are part of the story. And there's not a lot of literature on some of this stuff. You have to go to the fringes to find a lot of this literature. But here we go. So, Drugs of the Dreaming. Authors at the top. Where does this come into play? Well, people get addicted to the internet. So, if you could interface with a virtual reality in a quantum internet, and this world was rendered in real time in such a way that you could hardly distinguish reality from the virtual world, and you could exist in this virtual world and build businesses and live and make friendships and make money, survival tokens, and actually live in a virtual world in order to perpetuate your physical world. How is that different than dreaming? What if you're just in a waking dream at that point? So there's a lot of ways that this idea plays in to paradigm shift, including the use of what I call tryptamines in the story, which are nitrogen-based alkaloids related to tryptophan. They're metabolites in most cases, I believe. But getting specific, that would be your DMT, psilocybin, things like that. So these kind of play a role in paradigm shift in how they have altered the perception of the world in paradigm shift. So take that with, say, a blurring of the lines between virtual reality, and dream reality. That's in paradigm shift too. Okay, just real quick, another one. I'm still taking questions. If anybody wants questions. If you're just tuning into this, you're like, what's this guy talking about? I'm talking about a book I'm running called Paradigm Shift. You can find more information on it on Facebook at Paradigm Shift Primer. Altered States of Consciousness. This is written pre-1970, so it's pre-prohibition. In fact, some of the articles in here are by scientists that are trying to be persuasive and not to Congress and not prohibiting many psychedelic drugs. But again, this goes back to altered perception, variations in the nature of perception and the world that we are inhabiting. A lot of that plays in the paradigm shift. On that note, this music is Jet's theme. It's Primer. The song is actually called Primer. It's going to be released under the name Power Monkey, which is me. Kind of me, and my buddy Lance plays guitar. But Power Monkey is still a prototype idea. It's work in progress. It's one of the first songs that will be officially released. It's called Primer, in parentheses, Jet's theme. And the beginning to middle of book one, you get to understand some of these themes that are expressed in the music that very much deal with this idea of altered perception, altered reality, learning to see the world in new ways. So this book is called Paradigm Shift, and it's called Paradigm Shift for a reason, and it's primarily because I'm trying to explore new ways to look at the world. So the book is about new ways to look at the world. One of the characters, Jet, is about learning to see the world in new ways. So this is Jet's theme. And it's about the conflict between a native and an alien intelligence, as expressed in the music. So, all right. Okay, I'll make this my last one, and then I'll wrap it because it's been long enough, and I don't even know how this looks on the other end. But Hallucinogens and Culture by Peter First. I guess I could better explain this. If you could see the illustration on the cover, that is from I believe that is from Teotihuacan. I could be wrong. It's kind of Central Mexican. It's inspired by Mayan, but it represents a tree that enables the ascension of the spirit. And of course, in Mesoamerican culture, this means many things. And as a kind of secularized Judeo-Christian people, much of it doesn't make sense to us, but it made sense to them. And, again, I don't want to give away too much, but there are natures about the connection between plants, between consciousness, like chemistries of plants and consciousness and ascending states of consciousness. And of course, this book by Peter First, this is what it's about. Using anthropological evidence and archaeological evidence. This is a great book in the science of ethnobotany. But, to find it, I had to go to the sort of fringe pop culture section when it's a legitimate work of anthropological research, in my opinion. So that's it. So look, there's so many other books. I mean, science fiction books, movies. This was an attempt to kind of introduce in some small ways and without giving away too much information, without making it overcomplicated what this story is about. The story is Paradigm Shift Primer and Paradigm Shift, temporarily named Entangled. This is the working title. But there's going to be a lot more of this information coming soon. And being that I am leaving Facebook, I might be leaving Paradigm Shift Primer, which is attached to this video via a link. If you're interested in some of the things that I'm talking about, and if you want more information, go ahead and follow that. And then follow me on YouTube, because there's more information coming on YouTube. There's a lot of things coming in that department. So those watching this, thank you for watching. Thank you for staying up late. It is quite late. It's 12:23 in the mountains of Colorado. Thank you for watching. Thanks for your support, and have a good night. This has been Meta Facebook, episode 3, Paradigm Shift Edition.